Niagara Falls. The impressive flow of water that draws visitors from all over the world is roughly equivalent to the amount of water that is being pumped out of the ground by wells in the United States alone. Much of the planet relies on groundwater, and in places around the world, in regions of Asia, Africa, the Middle East, Latin America, and the United States, so much water is being pumped from the ground that aquifers are being rapidly depleted and wells are going dry.
Is this incredible global phenomenon that we really didn't, we never really understood it the way we understand it now. It's pervasive and it's happening at a rapid clip.
It will be an understatement to call it serious.
We're getting down to the bottom of that huge pool of water that in the 50s and 60s we thought was inexhaustible.
Groundwater is going down, no exception.
We've passed a point that we've never seen before in history here.
Nos va a hacer desaparecer. Simplemente con el agua. Sin agua, ¿qué vamos a hacer?
With the help of satellite technology, our view is not limited to the surface of the Earth. Locked in a tandem polar orbit, twin satellites named GRACE look down at the Earth. GRACE's ability to measure small changes in gravitational pull allows it to observe changes in water content, from glaciers to groundwater. These satellite measurements show areas around the world where water supplies are declining and where groundwater is being depleted.
Pauli, Ari. Hey, Pauli! Paul. Paul. Dun. ये लेगा ले गया अब मेरे केला बाप सर कभी गया नहीं फोटो सर गया
In India, a groundwater crisis has been building for decades. NASA imagery of groundwater depletion shows clearly that something serious is happening in the northern state of Punjab. Punjab means the land of 5 rivers. Its rivers have been divided and diverted into a vast array of irrigation canals.
The situation in this region of India is quite critical.
According to Dr. Balwinder Singh Sidhu, the Commissioner of Agriculture for the state of Punjab, those canals only serve 27% of Punjab's agricultural needs.
Rather, in this state of Punjab, we have almost 98% area under assured irrigation, out of which about 27% is based on surface water, that is a canal system, and 73% is based on groundwater. So since we are using large part of groundwater for irrigation, so situation is that groundwater table in the state is declining.
ਜਦੋਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਛੋਟੇ ਸੀ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਐ ਪਾਣੀ ਟੋਆ ਪੱਟ ਕੇ ਤੇ ਪਾਣੀ ਕੱਢ ਲੈਂਦੇ ਸੀ।
When I was a child, the water level was only 1 or 2 feet from the ground level. And in my last 45 years, the water level goes down every year.
It is declining at an increasing rate. It started declining in 1979.
I mean, it will be an understatement to call it serious. In my state, I've talked with farmers who have sunk 60 bore wells in just one piece of farmland that they own, and all of the 60 bore wells failing. In Marathi, there's this word called tsalan. Tsalan really means, a body with bullet wounds. So that's what's happening to the land here. It's being reduced to a body with bullet wounds, and there is no water coming from there.
The water in an aquifer is called groundwater. An aquifer is a geological formation that has the capacity to store and transmit water. An aquifer is largely an unconfined aquifer, which is close to the surface, which is not confined on the top by another layer of rock. And then there's the confined aquifer, which is confined or compressed between two layers of impermeable rock. A large diameter well, commonly called a dug well, is sunk into the ground by excavating rock or rock material close to the surface of the earth. A borehole, on the other hand, is a hole that is drilled in a hard rock, and a tube well is drilled in sediment or alluvium or soil which is unconsolidated, and therefore it needs a tube to keep the loose material from collapsing in.
We always say that groundwater is actually the lifeline of India. It's not the water that flows over the ground, it's actually the water that flows under the ground that is the lifeline of majority of the country.
This is Kulwinder Singh, a third-generation farmer who works with his father Shinder on their 20-acre farm at the edge of the village of Buzraj. The water that flows in Kulwinder's fields comes at a price. The declining water table means that Kulwinder has had to deepen his wells every year to keep his farm viable. For Punjabi farmers like Kulwinder, choosing what crops to grow comes down to economics. The fodder that Kulwinder cuts every morning is destined for his cattle, who provide milk and fuel for cooking in the form of manure, collected daily by his great aunt, Nasib Kaur. The Indian government provides guaranteed pricing for some crops, and rice is consistently the most profitable crop for farmers to grow. Rice requires far more water than traditional crops.
मूर्खता है साडे जाने के जेह्ड़े क्यों ला रहे हैं यानी दोषी हो पूरी भी ना पंजाब is make a desert in the next in the future.
In Punjab, electricity is free for farmers. Most farmers leave their pumps on, so when the unreliable power comes on, their pumps run constantly.
In this situation, the farmer is already stressed, and depleting groundwater levels are proving to be the last straw in many cases. Farmers have actually committed suicides when their bore wells stopped yielding water.
The pressure on farmers in India is real, and the number of suicides is astonishing. According to the Indian National Crime Records Bureau, there is an average of 32 farmer or farm worker suicides per day across India. While that tragic fact can't be wholly attributed to falling groundwater, it is clear that failing wells is an important factor. Among farmers, the highest suicide rate in India is in the state of Maharashtra.
Hari, ha. So,
Bankat Suryawanshi works his family's 7.5-acre farm near the town of Nagarsoga.
पाण्याची एकदम बिकट अवस्था आहे मॅडम इथं. पाणी शक्यतो नाहीच असं धरून चालायचं. ज्याच्याकडे पैसा आहे, शेती जास्त आहे, तर तो पाण्यासाठी ट्राय करतो, पाणी लागतं. आता इथं 7 बोर झालेले आहेत, त्यांची परिस्थिती बोर घेण्यासारखी आहे, ते बाहेर आहेत. तर मग आता ही 7वं बोर आहे इथलं. इथं पाणी लागलं म्हणून ह्यांचं 4 एकर पाण्याखाली आहे.
The latest attempt to drill a well came up dry despite a depth of 900 feet. Rain is now the only source of water for their crops. Bankat and his cousin Shankar have had to take jobs in the town of Pune, 6 hours away, to help subsidize the family's farming operation. For the family's domestic needs, water is fetched every morning from a relative's abandoned borehole. Compared to other households in the area, it is a luxury.
Ay, curry.
In the nearby village of Dapagyon, water vessels are lined up in front of fountains that only run for an hour or two each morning. The entire village relies on one working well. 3 others have run dry. Water insecurity across rural India is a massive challenge that is hampered by the lack of government regulation.
Groundwater remains unregulated, entirely unregulated at this point of time.
Groundwater actually is not regulated here, but we are slowly trying to regulate it.
What is missing from a more comprehensive management of India's groundwater is the science part, which needs to focus on aquifers, and the demand management part, which needs to focus on changing, influencing human behavior.
If I have a bore well in my piece of land, I own that water.
My land, my water.
This sort of ownership is actually changing a common pool resource into a privatized resource, in which no matter if the person next to me is thirsty or his crop is dying, I can still take water from my bore well and cultivate sugarcane.
ਚਿੰਤਾ ਜਿਹੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਬਈ ਬੱਚੇ ਕੀ ਕਰਨਗੇ, ਅਸੀਂ ਤਾਂ ਆਪਦੀ ਉਮਰ ਭੋਗ ਲਈ ਵੀ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਤਾਂ ਪਾਣੀ ਮਿਲਣਾ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂਗਾ ਇਸ ਹਿਸਾਬ ਨਾਲ.
It's tough to think about what's been in my family for well over 100 years not being here in 20.
We have plenty of sunlight, we have plenty of good fertile soils. We even have a multitude of highly intelligent, hardworking people here. But the common denominator for all of that is water. Water is the limiting factor in life in general, but Southwest Kansas specifically.
From space, the surface of southwest Kansas looks like an arid checkerboard. Center pivot irrigation spins perfect circles of corn and milo in square-mile and quarter-mile sections. GRACE data confirms USGS well data and tells a story of dramatic declines in the High Plains or Ogallala aquifer.
So here in western Kansas, our groundwater is the Ogallala Aquifer, the High Plains Aquifer.
The Ogallala Aquifer is really granite wash off the front range of the Rocky Mountains over time that washed over the plains, filled in the low spots.
It's a very prolific aquifer, very porous, quite permeable, and contains a lot of water.
There is recharge, but it's at a very slow rate, maybe a half of an inch per year.
The lifeblood of our land is that Ogallala aquifer below us.
That comes from the Oglala Sioux Indian tribe.
It extends from north central Texas up through Nebraska.
It's the largest freshwater aquifer in the Western Hemisphere.
In '56, it appeared if we were going to stay on the farm without more acres, we would need to develop irrigation.
50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, irrigation was developed in western Kansas, and that's when the high use of the aquifer began.
Most farmers were drilling wells at this time and pumping to irrigate.
We've been pumping out of that for livelihoods to sustain ourselves and our livestock.
Now with the deep turbine pumps and the pressurized center pivot system, you could irrigate just about anywhere, any type of soil, and we did.
I would say we don't have an original well functioning anymore. They've all been re-drilled.
Irrigation is a good thing. Over the last 3 or 4 generations, we've just overdone a good thing.
As we pump water on our crops for irrigation, we're constantly drawing from that like a straw. So basically the water situation that we're in currently is we've been drawing from this aquifer, this source of water, for several decades now, and now we're down to the very bottom.
We're getting down to the bottom of that huge pool of water that in the 50s and 60s we thought was inexhaustible.
In some locations, the groundwater has basically disappeared.
If you're looking at your car gas tank and your gauge, we're clear down to the E.
When Grandpa was drilling wells, you find big gravel or rocks like this, you were going to find a really good well, and now it just now the only water it finds is a couple 3 feet at the very bottom of the well that the pumps can't effectively access anymore.
We're in Sublette, Kansas. It's the county seat of Haskell County, Kansas. It's kind of the hub of our farm. It started in 1902. My grandfather's father.
My great-grandfather homesteaded on this corner in 1902.
My great-great-grandfather, he received some ground from his father as a wedding gift.
Sometime in 1928, my great-grandmother ordered the house out of a Gordon Van Tine catalog. This is where my grandfather was raised and my dad was raised.
We're still farming that ground to this day, and we've just been building on top of that.
This particular farmstead has been where the last 2 generations of our family has started out after college.
We lived there probably a year before we had any kids.
The irony is the new irrigation well we drilled a couple years ago actually led to the demise of the domestic well.
Yeah, that was hard. I was like, can't we just drill that well again?
Right now my dad and my grandpa and my Uncle Jarvis are currently partners in the farm.
Jay does more of the economic side, Jarvis does more of the technology side. It tends to work real well together.
We've got Dad with the senior partner, the experience. My brother is the finance guy. He's in charge of marketing and our risk management. I don't care for that, so I'm lucky I get to do what I want to do. I get to be out in the field producing, more of the hands-on. My brother and I, we still got another 20 years at this before we can even begin to maybe think about retiring. Looking at our boys, the next generation, and we're trying to figure out how do we make this thing last longer, this thing being the aquifer. It's tough to think about what's been in my family for well over 100 years not being here in 20. It may mean that my kids or my nephews don't come back. May not even have a chance if that's their desire.
When harvest time comes and I see what's come of the things that I've done, that's whenever it really pays off for me, and that's when I get an awesome feeling inside. Well, the 98% of the population that's not working on farms, they need to understand that their food isn't coming from the grocery store shelf. It's ultimately coming from the fields of the heartland of America. And that heartland food is fed by the Ogallala Aquifer and the water that we draw from it. I want that opportunity so bad to be able to follow in those steps of my parents, grandparents, and previous generations, to see all the hard work that they've put in, and with our water situation, to see it hit like a brick wall. You know, I would consider coming back, but I'd have to lock in a 40-year investment that I can't surely make.
The corn's 20 kernels around, which is excellent, and it's 45 kernels long, so that's about 900 kernels. And if we multiply that by 30,000 plant population, we divide that by 80,000 kernels per bushel. It tells us that, you know, this corn would probably yield in the 220 to 240 bushel range, so which would be very good. So this is a good crop here, but it only lasts as long as the water's here. And what disturbs me this morning, checking on this irrigation well, is it's showing signs of weakening. When I checked the water there, I found air suspended in the water, and that means that down at the bottom the pump is starting to gasp air, like when you finish a soda with a straw out of a glass. Right at the end you get that sucking sound. Well, this is the very beginning of that sucking sound, and this will last another 5 or 10 years, but not even at the production rate that we're at here today. So it's just a question of how much time is left. I suppose we should let ourselves enjoy a good crop while it's here, but we can't lose sight of the long term. And that's what I worry about for Jared and Jaden and Jesse, and James and Reese, and Ryan and Noah, and Ian. Those Garrettses will never see this. But thinking about Jared and the challenges that his generation faces, that's what leaves you gasping for air. Kind of leaves you at a loss for what to do next. We'll succeed somewhere. I just always thought it would be here. The population in southwest Kansas today would be reduced by 90%, maybe more, if you removed water from the equation. And that's kind of a microcosm, in a way, for the whole planet, and the way we're looking at the strain, especially on groundwater, fresh groundwater supplies all over the globe.
What's happening in the Ogallala is a strong indicator of what we can expect in these other regions of great groundwater depletion. You know, the fact that they're running out of water means that we will no longer be growing food there.
This aquifer issue has become kind of the insidious, felt but not seen cancer, if you will, that's pitting neighbor against neighbor, and communities are tearing themselves apart, and that could all change if our state elected officials would step out in the middle of the court and call time out and help us start making some mandatory changes.
This is not something that you can solve overnight with just a couple of different policies. And it's not something that if you just enforce a couple of things now, that's going to solve our water problem for the next 50 years. This requires community buy-in for decades.
At the rate we're going today, we don't have to 2100 to run out. I think it's closer to 2050 or maybe even less. The good news is all the information we need to take action and buy a longer time horizon is all very clearly here. The only thing missing is the resolve to start by taking the first step. But it has to be a collective effort because an individual is it just amounts to unilateral economic disarmament if you slow down your pump before your neighbor does.
لما الناس خدموا تعيا وسلموا مساكن ما كاينش الماء والماء بتكون شي 5 سنين دروك هذه باش تقرا الماء ما تلاقى.
From Morocco, completely to the west, to east, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, even to Iran. In all these countries, groundwater is going down. No exception. No exception. It's going down and something has to be done.
The Belkadi family well goes down almost 200 meters. From a piece of broken glass, a shaft of light reaches for the bottom. Dug by hand and deepened on 2 occasions, the well is now covered and abandoned.
الماء بدا يقلل من اسمه من ديك العمال ديال الجفاف بدا يقلل بزاف واقول اسيدي دروك شي 7 سنين ولا 8 باش بدا الماء يقلل.
C'est un domaine qui appartient à tout le monde. Le premier servi, le premier qui va gagner. Donc c'est la course à l'exploitation. C'est ça le grand problème des ressources souterraines. Si on n'exploite pas cette ressource, il y aura les voisins qui vont l'exploiter. Et donc il y a cette course à exploiter cette ressource. Donc il faut arrêter cette chaîne. C'est ça le grand défi, le grand problème.
The level decrease and continue decreasing more than 3 meters year. It's too much.
On a constaté un grand déficit au niveau des ressources souterraines, notamment au niveau de la nappe de Sousse.
Sousse-Massa, c'est une région où les conditions climatiques sont favorables pour le développement agricole. On produit lorsqu'il fait froid ailleurs. Et ça, c'est une qualité de la région. C'est-à-dire on peut produire les tomates au mois de décembre.
In the Sousse region, the depletion has gone over 70 meters.
There was over-exploitation of groundwater, unfortunately, by farmer mainly, because this farmer have a big farm and the crop are destined for to export, and then they over-exploit.
People economically were quitting their orchard It's they earn money by quitting, they also let them die.
ما نديروا بهم صافي انه شفنا فيهم عن والو شفنا فيهم عن ندامه صافي اش ما بقاو كيديروا والو ان الا بقاو ما غادي يخسروا الارض ولا يدير شي حبوب ولا شي حاجه صافي. لا فلاحه كثار كاين جيراننا هنا هما يمشي قبلنا من هنا تا هما الماء كامل وكل شيء. هذه المنطقه هنا ديال سبت قدا هنا مضره عندها ضرر بزاف هي على الماء هما الخدمه وداك الشيء راه الناس بغاو يخدموا ولكن ما كاين باش يخدموا.
As Morocco started to face their water challenges, they began by building dams.
Before the 60s of the last century, Morocco was mainly entirely dependent on groundwater. And after the 60s, the late King Hassan II has decided to adopt a new policy of water, which is called the policy of big dams.
Donc on va continuer pour les 20 années à venir à construire les barrages, donc à un rythme moyen de 3 grands barrages par an. Nous n'avons pas d'autre solution au Maroc. Nous sommes obligés de continuer à construire les barrages, même si ça coûte de plus en plus cher. Et ça coûte en termes de financiers, mais également en termes d'impact socio-économique.
Donc on se trouve ici au barrage Youssef Ben Tachfine. C'est parmi les grands barrages de la région, avec une capacité de 300 millions de mètres cubes.
The carrot and the stick. When you build more dams, you are just giving carrots all the time. And people are claiming water. But if you tell them, well, that's good, we bring water, but at the same time you have to save water, and if you don't save it, penalty. That's the stick. And you have to pay for water, that's the stick. You have to balance.
ما عندنا ما ندير داكشي تاع الله تعالى كيف غدير؟ ما عندنا ما ندير هما على هادي بغاو شي حاجه تحيد هما راه بغاو الانتاج ولكن ما كاين ما الله تعالى ما كان اللي دار الله تعالى هي اللي كاينه.
Amigo, ya. No, amigo, no. Retrocede. Ay, amigo, ya, amigo.
Ya, no firme.
Amigo, ya, no firme.
Llévate la yuca, buena yuca, $1 el kilo, buena yuca. $2 el ajo, la yuca, el zapallo, la papa peruanita.
In Peru, the Ica Valley has become a lucrative farming region. It's located in the desert between the foothills of the Andes and sand dunes that stretch westward for miles toward the Pacific Ocean.
Ica está destinada a ser el California de Perú, en crecimiento económico acelerado. Acá ha generado puestos de trabajo, divisas para el país, alimentos para el mundo.
The crops grown on large farms around Ica are mostly exported, and the farms use water pumped from wells.
Nos va a hacer desaparecer. Simplemente con el agua. Sin agua, ¿qué vamos a hacer?
Antes tú ponías un pozo y a 3 metros tenías agua. ¿Ya? Ahora te vas a 300 metros para abajo y todavía ya no tienes agua.
Se está secando. Era más a 20, a 30 de profundidad. Anteriormente no era esa profundidad que había allá ahorita, que son 200 a 180. Que hay tantísimos pozos que están haciendo y no sé cómo, a pesar que está prohibido.
Que estamos destruyendo no solamente el futuro de las generaciones venideras, sino que estamos depredando los recursos.
In all of these economic activities, there must be an absolute respect for resources and for the rights of other people.
Perú ha sido uno de los primeros productores de espárrago fresco a nivel mundial.
Es un crimen, por decirlo menos, sembrar espárragos en un desierto, porque es uno de los productos más demandantes en recurso hídrico.
Asparagus should have been outlawed way back when this problem began.
Son negocios muy rentables, ¿no? Muy, muy rentables. El hecho de tener un cultivo que demande tanta agua, si bien es cierto, es muy rentable, sin embargo, el costo ambiental y social no se justifica.
Y el pequeño agricultor, históricamente en Ica, ha sido productor de productos de zonas secas. Y hay tantos productos que podrían ser perfectamente aprovechables y que no se hace, porque lo que se busca solo es la ganancia. A mí lo que me preocupa no solamente es la depredación de los recursos naturales, que ya lo estamos viviendo, sino la profunda exclusión que vivimos.
The large landlords came into Ica. Most of their capital is from Lima and some from Chile and from outside. And they started buying up all of the wells they could from small. They had a lot of capital. And if you're a small farmer or medium-sized farmer, and your well breaks down, you don't have the capital.
Esto ha sido casi toda la historia de los últimos años de la pequeña agricultura, cómo simplemente se ha ido marginando de toda actividad productiva y se ha tenido que ir a actividades de servicio, dejar la chacra o quedarse con mínimas parcelas.
Alberto Cuya and his small farmers co-op sold 2 of their wells to a large farm because they couldn't afford to fix them. They run another well with a diesel engine. One of the wells that they sold now sits behind locks, cameras, and an electric fence.
Tienen una empresa grande, han mejorado, trabaja día y noche y damos cuenta que está quitando a los pozos más cercanos.
The small farmers, in terms of drinking water, where they live, recently in the last 3 years have tap water through their municipalities. They have it 2 to 3 times a week for about an hour, okay? That's the only water they have, drinking water. I will tell you the words of one of these big agro-exporters that went north. He told me, David, what you're talking about is absolutely right, and I fear that when the people don't have drinking water, they will come onto my farm and burn it down.
Mi temor es que puede ser caldo de cultivo de una mayor violencia. Violencia delincuencial, pero también violencia política.
We witnessed some of that violence when we visited the town of Okukahe.
What we have here is a town that's trying to prevent pipe from being laid, and through that pipe would run water from a well to areas farther away where this company would use it for their crops.
Jocelyn Guzman is a resident of Okukahe, and she's been opposing the company's plans.
Ahí hay un pozo. ¿Qué es lo que quieren? Extender sus tubos para solamente esperar el permiso y succionar el agua y llevársela a su fondo. Es que no hay permiso y no queremos que se saquen el agua porque es el único sustento que nosotros tenemos.
The company Agrícola La Venta is awaiting the government water authority's approval to start using 3 wells. The company says it has permission to lay the water pipe, but sections of pipe were left burned by those who are trying to stop the project. Some of the people spent that night blocking access to the road to keep the work from resuming. That night turned out to be a quiet one. The next morning, we met Jocelyn again.
Nosotros somos procedentes de aquí de Okukahe.
After a brief interview, she offered to show us another location where she had heard the company was starting to lay more pipes.
¿Qué pasa, amigo? Amigo, soy de Cucaje, estoy pasando. Amigo, ¿qué pasa?
Slowing down the video, you can clearly see the moment when one of the men punched her in the mouth. And then one of them yelled, "We're gonna go to your house."
Ya. Sí, retroceda. Retroceda. Ya, amigo, ya. No, amigo, no. Retrocede. Ay, amigo, ya, amigo. Amigo, ya,
no firme.
Ya, no firme.
Ya vete.
Retrocede. Papi, me han pegado ahorita acá los maleantes de acá. Mamá, vengan para acá que me han pegado, ven para acá. Me ha pegado un maleante de acá de Agrícola La Venta, vengan para acá. Sí, me han pegado acá con el carro aquí, están que atracan acá.
Later, we reached the company's manager, Javier de los Rios, by phone. He said he wouldn't approve of any violence by his workers. He said those who opposed the company's plans had acted aggressively toward his workers, and he accused Jocelyn of burning the company's water pipes.
No le buscaron la bronca, como decimos acá. Nos quemaron 7 tubos. La gordita esa que usted dice que le han pegado, ella tiró la gasolina para prenderle fuego a los tubos. A la gente de seguridad de la empresa les he preguntado y ellos me han dicho que ellos no han intentado hacer nada con los periodistas que vinieron y que no los han visto. Pueden estarme mintiendo porque tampoco son unos angelitos. Y si fue el caso, yo le pido disculpas, pero eso no está avalado por nosotros.
Jocelyn said it was the townspeople who burned the pipes in protest, and they're worried that when the company starts to pump water, it will leave them with less for their crops. The company's manager insisted that pumping groundwater here won't cause any harm for the small farmers. But in this region of Peru, groundwater levels have been declining in many areas, and it's likely there will be more conflicts like this one in the future.
There may be a migration out of here if this keeps on happening like happened in the Dust Bowl years.
I feel like we're standing between the railroad tracks and we see the train coming and the lights going like this and we're saying, God darn it, I hope he don't hit us.
We've passed a point that we've never seen before in history here.
The whole western United States, it's kind of scary to know where are you safe.
This one used to have water coming out just out of the wellhead. Goes down 138 feet, there's nothing.
If nothing's put back in, eventually you run out. And that's where they're at right now.
You can't continue withdrawing from the bank without shutting the bank down.
If it were to start raining tomorrow and rain for a year and a half or 2 years straight, we'd still have this problem.
It's dry. This field's bone dry.
Dust Bowl was a result of a water problem.
Just do the math. I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of acres fallowed that are doing nothing but blowing dust and tumbleweeds.
In some areas around here, there is no more groundwater to pump. It is completely dry. You can drill a well as however much money you want to spend, and you don't stand a real good chance of hitting water.
Grapes of Wrath was written about what was going on here during those Dust Bowl years.
If I could, I'd leave. If it wasn't for family and land and stuff, I'd leave.
Everybody is using groundwater. That's how we sustain ourselves through a dry time where there is no surface water. We're all pumping from the same bowl. We all got straws in the ground.
In the past 3 years, we've had 6 wells go out.
Wells have been going dry already. I can point you to properties. I can see 3 of them right now who've had their wells go dry.
In the wine-growing region of Paso Robles and the vast fertile Central Valley, widespread groundwater depletion threatens the future of residents and farmers alike.
We use this corn silage used to feed our cattle. And as you can see, it's pretty burnt up from mite, and mite comes along with the dust, and dust comes along with dryness.
You know, whoever's got the longest straw, being the deepest well, is going to be the one with water the longest. This is our family farm, Kissick Farms. We've been farming here approximately 105 years. This grove has been pushed out due to the fact of limited water. It's a Washington navel variety that we had here. And this fruit is shipped all across the United States, into Japan, Korea, even into China.
There's no longer enough water to do everything that we want to do. We can no longer grow as much food as we're growing, as inefficiently as we're growing it. We can no longer ignore the fact that some of our agricultural practices are leading to problems with surface water and groundwater availability for local communities.
We can't do this, but that's what we do. That's how groundwater has been managed.
We pretended groundwater was some separate part of the system that we could ignore. We can't ignore it any longer.
This is the Creston Valley. And so this valley is open to what's called the Templeton Gap. So it's open to the Pacific Ocean, basically. So every afternoon we get these breezes come through here, and that's what allows these wine grapes to thrive, because it could be 100 degrees in the day, but it'll drop to 55 at night. We've probably dropped an average of 70 feet in the last 10 years. It's probably dropped half of that in the last 3 to 4. You know, when you look at the rise and fall of civilizations, water is often at the center, whether they were successful or ultimately they maybe weren't. I mean, I think we should do something about it. I don't want to sit here and say, God, maybe I should have done something about that. Yeah, doggone it, maybe there was a problem. The county's getting a 1%, more or less, getting a 1% property tax off the value of these vineyards, which is probably at least $30,000 an acre for every vineyard that's here. Plus they're getting it off the winery, plus they get sales taxes and all that. If this industry collapses, it's going to hit the county coffers pretty hard.
We have known that a number of our basins have been declining for literally decades. A variety of reasons, from simple more pumping than the basin can stand, to other basins which have had pollution from septic tank systems and more growth than they can sustain. So in the last 20 to 30 years, we've seen groundwater supplies decline in many parts of the county. It's really only in the last 3 to 4 years, with the drought really hitting us hard, that we are seeing some more dramatic effects. We're seeing well levels drop very seriously, especially in Paso Robles. We're seeing seawater intrusion in a groundwater basin that's just to the south of us here. And so I say that the drought has put a magnifying glass on a problem that's been brewing for a long time.
Here behind me is a stock trough for our cattle. Just on the other side of that fence, there's a well that was put in by a vineyard. And within 1 month of the vineyard well going in, this went dry. Come on, girls. We cut that number of cattle down by 65% because we cut back on water usage. Some of the large wineries in the area, their well goes 1,000 feet, and the tube coming out of the ground is this big, versus the tube that comes out of the ground at our well is this big. Theirs is going 24/7. Well, ours is only going enough to water the cattle and to supply water to the houses.
Come on, Raleigh. There you go. We are 100% reliant on our groundwater. Early in the 1990s, we saw a very large influx of vineyards planted in the area, lots and lots and lots of wine grapes, which has been a spectacular thing for our economy. I can't downplay that. But as a rural resident, I found myself personally getting very worried back in the early 90s even that this supposedly endless aquifer that we sat over, that we were assured would last forever when we bought our place, would be endangered.
My well's dry for 2 years already. Okay, ready? Let's go. Let's go. Good boy. Come here. Come here. Give me the ball. Give me good boy. Ready? I had a nice lawn in the back, growing my garden and everything. And all of a sudden, you know, it's just these vineyards started to kill us. There's a couple vineyards on that side, but the main vineyards that are killing us is over here behind us. Well, you can see this where the water comes from my neighbor's well. You know, we're all hooked up together, so actually both neighbors have offered to help me out on water. You know, it's nice, but I'm pretty sure they can only take so much, you know. It's kind of sad for homeowners, you know. We can't afford a well. They can afford 6, 7, 8 wells.
The Central Valley of California is a highly productive agricultural area. It has lots of sunshine, but limited rainfall, and it's an excellent area for growing food crops and is kind of the breadbasket of the U.S. As the water table drops, that can cause clay, silty materials to compact as the water drains out of them.
People will call up and say, hey, something's happening, your casing is pushing out of the ground. The casing's not pushing out of the ground. The surrounding ground around those wells is sinking.
So out in the San Joaquin Valley, I measure two things primarily. One being groundwater levels, and the other being aquifer system compaction, which is a proxy for land subsidence. I've been measuring groundwater levels declining. Almost all of the wells are either at, near, or beyond historical lows, meaning that they're lower than they ever have been in their history. Hold at 166. And now we reel it back up and see where the water line is. 5.45.
In order to basically give a visual to people of how much the ground has been sinking, Joe Poland stood next to a large telephone pole, and on that telephone pole he put dates of where the land surface was at various times. And you can see that near the top of that telephone pole that's where the land surface used to be.
This can be a major problem. If you have a canal going across an area that's subsiding in the middle of it, then all of a sudden the flow in the canal is disrupted, and you can't just get water in a canal to go back uphill.
So this is a broken canal lining. I'm on the Delta Mendota Canal, and this has been a problematic area for subsidence for many years. Subsidence occurs when you have two things. You have to have clay, you have to have the right geology, and you have to have groundwater level declines. A clay is a little bit different than other particles because it's a platy mineral, and when it's deposited in random orientations. There's a lot of space between the grains. It holds lots of water. When groundwater level declines, the aquifer responds, and the clay units in particular respond so that they actually start rearranging themselves into a stack. And you can see that there's a lot less space between a stack of plates than randomly oriented ones. So the result is there's a smaller volume underground of clay and the land subsides. As a result of that, the clay cannot hold or store as much water as it did before the compaction occurred.
Once it's compacted, the capacity to retain water is lessened.
So I'm sitting on the bridge that crosses the outside canal, which is another canal in the San Joaquin Valley. And as you may be able to see here, that the water surface is higher than the bridge surface. When the bridge was originally built, the water was quite a bit below the bottom of the bridge. But as subsidence has occurred, the bridge has come down, The water surface elevation has to remain at a certain level to allow it to continue flowing downhill, but now you see that the water surface is higher than the bridge, and this bridge has to be replaced because it's eroding the integrity of the bridge.
So part of the tension about water resources around the world is this balance between how much water humans want and how much water ecosystems require.
Environmental regulations are causing the loss of so much good, clean water.
Well, I mean, it doesn't help when you have people in Sacramento and San Francisco who are letting a little fish rule how water can be distributed.
The environmentalists have been using the Delta smelt as a reason to push more and more of that water out through the bay.
The more water humans take out of the system, the more pressure there is on natural ecosystems, the less water we leave in rivers and streams for fish.
We lost 200,000 acre feet a year, up to 200,000 acre feet to the San Joaquin River Restoration Act.
We call it an environmental drought.
As the demand for water grows, the pressure to take more water by humans out of ecosystems is growing. The answer really is not find more surface water in a place like California. We use all the surface water pretty much in California already. We're not going to take any more without causing massive additional ecosystem disruption.
What we see under these free-for-all conditions is that many people are pumping and the water table is dropping. It's now dropping at the fastest rate ever. And so that means that people with shallower wells, which are many, many people, their wells are going dry.
Nosotros vivimos alrededor de muchos rancheros y eso es lo que yo pienso que está pasando aquí, que no llueve y que ellos están usando el agua de todas maneras para sacar su producto.
Farmers come first. The valley is set up that way.
When I heard the motor, the well just making a loud buzzing noise, and then I tried to turn on a spigot and nothing.
We've been without water for about 6 or 7 months now.
I called the well company again. They came out, put the dipstick down, and nothing. They said your well's dead.
Crops are the #1 priority.
Ellos están usando mucho para ellos enriquecerse y nosotros nos están dejando sin agua.
There's a town called Porterville. It's not too far from us. They're in bad shape.
What's happening now is a lot of the homes, the majority of the homes, have their own private well system which feeds water to their home, and those wells are all drying up.
It is absolutely an emergency. Tulare County is really ground zero for the drought in California. Approximately 55 to 60% of the dry wells in California are in Tulare County, with the majority of those wells being in this specific area of East Porterville.
Unless it directly affects you or someone you love, you don't understand what these people are going through.
The days of having abundant water in many parts of the world are long gone.
The key is not the resource per se, the key is governance of the resource.
It's figuring out how to manage surface water better so that we're using it more carefully and we're not overdrafting the groundwater.
Increase the recharge into aquifer systems to basically build up that bank account.
We have no choice but to figure out how to use the water we're already extracting from the system more efficiently. Let's figure out how to grow more food with less water.
There's tremendous room for irrigation efficiency. Right? We need far more drip irrigation. We need far more deep drip irrigation.
changing the crop mix and growing less water-intensive crops.
Growing the right things in the right places.
In some places, it's possible that we're taking too much out of the system, and the only way to bring it back into balance is to reduce what we're doing.
It's a multidisciplinary task that requires an integration of hydrogeology as a science, understanding aquifers, engineering in improving efficiencies of supplies, and sociology, economics, and ecology in managing demand, so that we have a comprehensive toolkit of groundwater management.
We have to teach children to make them aware about this problem.
You have to be thinking about water pricing and charging the true value for water. Right now, in most places in the US anyway, we don't really pay for the water, we just pay for the service to move the water from point A to point B.
Every state has their own set of rules and laws and regulations. And so it's hard to come up with general management principles that can be applied everywhere.
Without some kind of community consensus, it's going to keep going the way it's going. Why not? Everybody's going to scramble and get as much as they can for themselves. So we need to kind of force the community to have a consensus through a management agency.
If you do it collectively, then everyone get the ownership. And when you get the ownership of the diagnosis, and from there, build a strategy collectively, and from the strategy develop action plan, then at that point, everyone, all stakeholders, get ownership of that action plan and they try to implement it, because they see that succeeding in doing it is a success for all.
I feel like there are a number of things that we should be talking about in California and around the world that we don't talk about. They're off limits. Telling farmers what they can grow, what they shouldn't grow, changing water pricing, rethinking water law. Scrap the whole thing and start from the beginning, do it over again. It would look completely different.